Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is September 13th, and we have a lot of interesting news. In this episode, it seems that Putin has decided to live forever. His inner circle is pouring billions into the genetics of immortality, and one of his daughters has taken the lead on an anti-aging project. How dictators throughout history have searched for the key to eternal youth. I'll talk about that in this episode. And also, a story about Stalin. It will definitely surprise you. Meanwhile, Europe should expect new provocations from Russia literally in the coming days. And what shocking discovery NATO made just a couple of days ago. All this and more in today's episode. There's a lot of interesting stuff ahead. So if this is your first time on this channel, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So Putin has seriously set his mind on living, if not forever, then at least for a very long time, definitely more than 100 years. Or is it his inner circle that wants everyone to think so? I think many of you remember that conversation between Putin and Xi Jinping in China about how to extend life. Putin was saying that soon it would be possible to endlessly transplant organs, while Xi said that in this century, people would be able to live up to 150 years. So what is it that they know? So here's the thing. Putin started concerning himself with this topic much earlier. Over the past 5 years, funding for projects related to life extension has increased eightfold. In Russia, Novaya Evropa writes about this. And now Russian taxpayers' money is already supporting 43 projects in the field of fundamental medicine that are related to aging. I think you understand perfectly well that all these projects, all this colossal money, billions and billions, are not meant to extend the life of the average Russian pensioner. Well, to be precise, they are meant to extend the life of one particular Russian pensioner. In other words, Putin really doesn't want to go to hell, where, by the way, they might not even accept him. And all this activity is controlled by Putin's inner circle. Back in 2020, his daughter Maria Vorontsova oversaw a joint project with Rosneft, specifically the Center for Genetic Research. The project was called the Genome of Russians. The idea was to collect and decode a dataset of 100,000 DNA samples. Naturally, the backbone of the project was made up of Rosneft employees. In short, colossal amounts of money were allocated. In November 2018, Putin issued a decree on the development of genetic technologies. So, in general, he's been involved in this for a long time. And of course, he controls not only his daughter, but also his closest circle. For example, the Kovalchuks, who are notably very close to Putin. One of these Kovalchuks heads the Kurchatov Institute, which oversees many projects related to the study and slowing of aging. They play a key role there. In other words, a group has formed consisting of people very close to Putin, even some who are related to him by family ties. These are the people who are overseeing this topic, so they approach the matter very seriously. You know, it sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. When something serious happens, some disaster strikes the planet. And there's a group of people close to those in power, especially valuable employees for them. Only they possess some kind of top secret knowledge. And as a rule, when some catastrophe occurs, they hide somewhere. This project is called Ark, or Noah's Ark. Well, you've probably seen movies like that. There are a lot of them. But I have another hypothesis, according to which that conversation between Putin and Xi Jinping, which Chinese television later strictly forbade from being shown, including to the Reuters news agency, well, that conversation was leaked on purpose, and someone turned on the microphone at that exact moment for a reason. It seems to me that when they toss around numbers like that between themselves, like, yes, in this century we'll live to 150, or soon I'll be practically immortal. By the way, one of them, that Vorontsova daughter, she was overseeing it, including projects that involve bioprinting organs, so it's not just a coincidence. This conversation got out and the whole world heard it. It feels like at some point at the very least, voters will be told, hey, listen, aren't you wondering why Putin is 100 years old and hasn't changed at all? Or why he's been sitting on the throne for another 50 years, as if absolutely nothing has changed? We've been telling you nowadays you can transplant organs as much as you want. We just keep transplanting them, even though by that time maybe 10 replicants will have already been replaced, just like now. Different ones are traveling around the world, well, at least to Alaska. Some very strange ones showed up there. in general, it feels like they're just going to keep spreading and spreading this information that yes, now it's not a problem. Yes, Putin hasn't changed in 150 years simply because we know a little secret, even though you and I can guess what that secret is. So, after his conversation with Xi Jinping, Putin visited the Sirius laboratory complex in the Krasnodar region. There they showed him rejuvenating strawberries, which they also somehow, they modify them, work on their genome, something like that. And in general, I think you get the idea that the topic of Putin wanting to live a very, very long life is now a key one for him. By the way, in 2024, Putin announced a new national project, New Health Preservation Technologies, and the goal is to save 175,000 lives. But how does that work? He destroyed 1 million lives in this war, didn't he? And now he's launching some projects to save 175,000. So he's also overseeing this project. That's the same Kovalchuk. In short, everything is as it should be. You know, all dictators, now we're getting to a very interesting part, all dictators, almost without exception, have tried to find a way to extend their lives. They tried to find that elixir of youth. Both Pinochet and Muammar Gaddafi, who had an entire army of doctors traveling with him, both the father and grandfather of Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-un himself. They all searched for ways to achieve longevity, and often in very strange ways. The publication Prokt reported that, on the recommendation of Sergei Shoigu, Putin became interested in antler baths. This is a wellness procedure in which a person is immersed in a warm infusion made from the blood of young, not yet ossified deer antlers. They are called panty antlers, hence the name panty baths. Well, it's rather barbaric. The procedure, to be honest, especially considering how these antlers are obtained, these are essentially young antlers that haven't yet ossified. It's tissue saturated with capillaries. In other words, they're still soft. And the reason these baths are called bloody is because there are so many capillaries, and these antlers are placed in there, an infusion is made, and so on. And then some old man soaks in this infusion. They are harvested in a barbaric way. So it's basically an organ. When they're not yet ossified, they're just cut off. And anesthesia, of course, isn't always used. That's why it's a barbaric procedure, a barbaric way of harvesting. But Putin, of course, doesn't care. He could sacrifice 1 million people there. Why would he care about deer or marals? By the way, entire institutes were created for Lenin and Stalin to prolong their lives. The whole story there is actually very fascinating. A scientist, socialist ideologue, science fiction writer, and also a doctor by profession, Alexander Bogdanov. A close friend of Lenin, a very significant figure in the party. And so he got involved. By the way, he was also the keeper of the Bolshevik party's funds. So he first got Lenin and then Stalin interested in the idea of blood transfusion, not just for rejuvenation, but in the literal sense as well. So blood from young Bolsheviks was transfused to the elderly, and in turn from the elderly to the young Bolsheviks. So what was his idea? That youth and strength would be transferred from the young through their blood, and from the elderly, experience, wisdom, and something more. He had, since he carried a lot of weight in the party and was essentially the second most important person in the party before the revolution, a hobbyist, Lenin's favorite. And even before the revolution, he left politics for medicine in order to bring to life the idea from his science fiction novel, which he wrote in 1908, Red Star. In this science fiction novel, though I don't remember the exact plot right now, the main point is that Martians, aliens, abducted someone from Earth. Someone, and on Mars, they've already built communism. They're short on young people for blood transfusions, and there are 2 clans of communist Martians fighting each other. Basically, it's complete nonsense, but the main idea is about transfusing blood from elderly communists to the young, and vice versa. So in 1920, Bogdanov, he tells Lenin about the necessity of creating an institute for blood transfusion. Now we'll rejuvenate our party, everyone will become wise, and he gets approval. So he goes to England to study their experience. But while he was there studying, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin passed away. Well, Bogdanov doesn't give up. He infects the new leader, Stalin, with the idea of rejuvenating blood. And already in March 1926, by Stalin's order, he organized and headed the world's first institute of blood transfusion. And so initially it was all straightforward because it wasn't about studying some processes. It was simply because there was this idea that by transfusing blood you could rejuvenate, become smarter, or even something else. In total, he conducted 11 rejuvenating experiments on himself, but the 12th turned out to be fatal for him. In 1928, he transfused himself with blood from a student, and 3 hours later, both of them developed an acute reaction. The 21-year-old student recovered after a week, but as for this doctor, well, it's hard to even call him a doctor, he did not survive. So what was the issue? Back then, yes, most likely it was incompatibility of the Rh factor. But at that time, no one knew about the Rh factor yet, even though their blood types were the same. And so, after Bogdanov's death, Stalin thought, what is this? Something went wrong here, but still, we need to some kind of... And Stalin never let go of his dreams of a long life. And already in 1931, already terminally ill at that time with tuberculosis, Maxim Gorky tells him about a book by the English philosopher Bertrand Russell, Scientific Forecasting, and inspires Stalin with hope for prolonging life through medicine. And in general, at that time, articles were published in Pravda newspaper and so on. In 1932, on Gorky's initiative and with Stalin's support, it was decided to establish the All-Union Institute of Experimental Medicine in the USSR to search for ways to prolong human life. Basically, they created entire institutes just so that Stalin could live longer. So, based on that, they created a powerful institute, and the best specialists were sent there. And it's no coincidence that in 1944, the Academy of Medical Sciences of the USSR was established on its foundation. Also, it's interesting that one of the branches of this Institute of Experimental Medicine was opened in Kiev. It was headed by academician Bogomolets, Alexander Bogomolets, in 1938 on his initiative. The first scientific conference in the world on aging and the fight for longevity was held in Kyiv. At that time, Bogomolets said, "Why did this idea appeal to me so much? Where did I hear all these numbers? Why did I like it so much?" Bogomolets said the following back then. Let me remind you, this was 1938. Bogomolets wrote that the human body's reserve of vital energy is calculated to last at least 150 years. With the establishment of the socialist system, the chances of increasing the average lifespan have risen to the highest degree. What we now call old age will only be childhood and youth. But Xi Jinping repeated his words word for word. 150 years, what we now consider 70 years old to be an old person, that will be a child, and so on. We've all heard this before. I keep thinking, where have I heard all this? Maybe from Bogomolets, perhaps. Did Xi Jinping buy up some of Bogomolets' works or something? But as for Stalin, by the way, he later said, Bogomolets, he didn't live a long life at all, a very short one. And so Stalin said, well, he fooled us with all those youth serums of his. On the eve of the war, a detailed report appeared in the international foreign press about Bogomolets' so-called youth serum, which Stalin and Kalinin had their lives extended, but it's not exactly known what recommendations there were or what kind of serum it was. But when the most important institutions were urgently evacuated from Kiev, this institute was the very first to be evacuated from Kiev to Ufa. Apparently it was very important. It was valuable to Comrade Stalin. Academician Bogomolets received the Order of Lenin, the title of Hero of Socialist Labor, and the Stalin Prize of the First Degree. That wasn't for nothing either. Well, and then, when he died at over 60, Stalin said, rascal, so the serum won't work on me either. Well, apparently, it really didn't work. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It helps with promotion, and these kinds of historical excursions are interesting. About Ukraine, about Kiev. We'll keep making them, and not just about that. So, the next news item. Russia is not interested in escalating tensions with Warsaw. This was stated by Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Nebenzia. That is according to him, and you really need to hear this. Nebenzia made the following statement. The European War Party is whipping up hysteria around Poland, trying to derail a settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. So, you see how simple everything is for them. They're not to blame. That their 20 drones flew into Poland, Well, who hasn't had that happen? But you're the ones making a fuss, stirring up hysteria about it. So what if it's 20 drones, right? Let me just remind you, this is the same Russian representative at the UN who claimed that they found drones on Ukrainian territory with a capacity of up to 30 liters, supposedly meant for spraying bioagents to deliver killer mosquitoes, which somehow are supposed to only affect Russians. That's him. That's Nebenzia. Honestly, I don't know. They're just mocking the civilized world. And he's the author of this masterpiece. I remember that nonsense very well. So, listen to what Nebenzia said at the UN Security Council. In an ordinary Ukrainian village where all the residents speak Russian and travel to Russia, 2 Banderites move in. After 5 years, all the teenagers there become Banderites and march under Nazi flags, said Nebenzia from the UN Security Council podium. So it's like mosquitoes, apparently. They bite and everyone turns into Banderites. Or like Banderite vampires. I don't even know what that is. And this nonsense is what they listen to at the UN Security Council. And now he comes out with, we're not involved at all. You're the ones making a fuss here. Germany and France summoned the Russian ambassadors after the drone attack. Well, yeah. And after the missile attack, what did they do? Will they expel those ambassadors? Will they declare them persona non grata? Well, what? What kind of reaction is that? And France summoned the Russian ambassador in Paris, and acting foreign minister Jean Elbaro said live on air on one of the channels that Moscow must stop testing NATO and its allies for strength. And probably even stomped her foot like that. Oh, stop it, Moscow. Stop testing us for strength. But in my opinion, it's NATO that should make sure Russia stops testing them for strength once and for all. The next scenario could be much worse. And possibly, not only reconnaissance drones could come, and not only to Poland. You could at least make a mirror response, well, I don't know, let it go through Belarus. 20 drones in the area of the Lenin port region. Let a couple of them fall by chance, just so that 3 of them fall near each of the 2, or rather 2 oil refineries. Lukashenko, so that they would fall right there and show that you will be left without your last 2 factories if you do something like that again. Well, because it is necessary. Lukashenko also needs to be once and for all discouraged from playing good cop, bad cop with Putin. Pretend that I have nothing to do with it, it's all Putin, but in reality, he is involved in all of this. And he doesn't need to strike cufflinks with the White House like Donald Trump does. No, seriously. Donald Tusk responded to Trump and stated that the drone attack on Poland was not an accident. Well, that's pretty tough, by the way. Prime Minister. The Prime Minister of Poland said the following: "We would also like to think that the drone attack on Poland was a mistake, but it is not, and we know that." Well, and of course Trump said that it could have been an accident. I wonder if 20 drones accidentally violated the airspace of the United States and landed somewhere near military bases, Russian drones too. Would Donald Ramba call that a war? Or would they say, like birds, they just flew south and took a wrong turn? What's going on? And 46 UN member states signed a joint declaration on Russia's involvement in the drone incident in Poland. Only 46 in total. Let me remind you, there are 193 countries in the Organization of Concerned Nations. And what's surprising here is that besides Poland, Hungary also signed, and Georgia. Well, yes. So we see that Putin has received this terrible secret I mentioned earlier, the one revealed by NATO, that they are not ready for war at all. They were simply caught off guard that all these years, even now, as they are increasing defense spending to record levels in the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance, to record levels. Poland, for example, is spending 5% or more. But what kind of war are you preparing for? What were you buying? What were you buying when for 3.5 years drones and missiles have been flying over Ukraine? What exactly were you planning to defend against? Was it just intercontinental ballistic missiles or something else? Or was it tanks? What were you buying? Tanks. I have a friend, I remember, he was the first to show me videos like this of his unit. A young guy, just 20 years old. Back when FPV drones were just beginning to be used en masse at the front, he showed me a video of how, quite literally, a $500 drone was able to destroy a tank that was worth many, many millions of dollars. So, what exactly were you buying if you didn't even get the basics to counter Russian drones? Well, you basically did nothing about it. By the way, friends, let me remind you, for these brave guys who not only build drones themselves, but also pilot them and fight, right now, we are raising funds for a separate brigade of soldiers. They are currently fighting in the Pokrovsk direction. This is the Boden-Khmelnytsky brigade, and it's a very tough area, one of the hottest spots right now. At the moment, we've almost finished raising the funds. Let's pull together a bit more and help them out. They really do need transportation. Right now, it's extremely necessary there. The vehicle for them has already been reserved. So as soon as we finish the fundraiser, they'll get it right away. I'll definitely send a video and show you. It's very easy to support the fundraiser. There's a link to Private in the description of this video. There's also a link to Mono and a PayPal link for those who want to help from abroad. A huge thank you to all of you. If for some reason you don't see these details, there's a QR code that leads directly to the fundraising account. Now let's talk about which methods actually work when it comes to confronting the Russians. A severe fuel crisis is beginning in Russia after Ukrainian drones struck oil refineries. A gasoline shortage has already affected more than 20 regions. In other words, if previously the shortage was recorded in the Far East and Crimea, then September has brought another 10 new regions into the crisis. Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Saratov, Samara, Ulyanovsk, Penza, Rostov, Astrakhan regions, as well as Kalmykia and Tatarstan. As they say, we've arrived. Denaftization is in full swing. This is the only language the Russian Federation understands. Let me just remind you, there are 30 major oil refineries in Russia. Disabling even half of them would cause a nationwide fuel collapse. So, in response to the smug grins of Nebenzia, Lavrov, Zakharova, and Putin, and Medvedev in response to those arrogant smirks, we didn't want this. But this could very well be the answer. You don't know how your drones ended up here, but we don't know how our missiles ended up in the skilled hands of the Ukrainians. Well, and then at your refineries, believe me, for every drone, take out one Russian refinery. That's all. Putin won't forget anymore. He won't forget that Poland exists and that drones can be launched from there or somewhere else. And NATO has admitted that they are not ready to deal with cheap Russian drones. They made a frightening discovery. Let me remind you, out of 19 drones, only 3 or 4 were shot down. And in Ukraine, well, out of 19, 3 or 4. But over Ukraine, they launch 800 or more drones. And not just those Garan drones either. Not the ones without a warhead, but the huge Shaheds that can take out an entire apartment block. The Russians are now working to further increase the warhead size on these Shaheds. There are even jet-powered ones now. So they admitted it and naturally raised the question, are we going to do this every time? Are we supposed to scramble F-35s every time these drones come? So there are a lot of questions about what exactly was being purchased all this time and what kind of war they were preparing for. That's why there are 2 key directions now for our European partners, and to me, they seem absolutely obvious. To strengthen support for Ukraine and to adopt experience in countering unmanned aerial vehicles. On the other hand, of course, there should be economic pressure on Russia, and all restrictions on strikes against Russian Federation territory should be lifted. And believe me, they can't produce these drone manufacturing lines themselves. They managed to get them with great difficulty. They gathered them from all over the world, and obviously our partners from the so-called Dictators Club helped as well. Destroying these production lines and key nodes is the guarantee of your peace in Europe. In other words, as they say, not a single drone will take off from a burning Alabuga. And here's another telling piece of news. A US energy official said that Europe could stop using Russian gas within 6 to 12 months if it wanted to. If it wanted to, it wouldn't hurt for the communists to give up liquefied natural gas as well. France, Spain, and Belgium are the main ports for receiving Russian LNG, where the gas is delivered by tankers. Seriously? Are you being serious right now? I'm looking at the statistics. Last year, the volume of Russian liquefied natural gas supplied to European countries increased. It increased in 2024. The volume increased. Well, France, of course, is really contributing there. The volume of Russian LNG in France's imports sharply increased, up 81% compared to the previous year. And here you have to understand that this is the port of Dunkirk. They receive Russian LNG and it either stays in France or is sold further on or goes to someone else. But the very fact, are you serious? And yet drones are already flying over you? Putin is launching them without any hesitation. Well, I wanted to finish on this news. Yesterday I talked about Prince Harry's visit, and today I saw a photo of him on the Maidan. He really did visit with his Invictus Games Foundation team, the Games of the Unconquered. And he discussed various rehabilitation programs for our soldiers who were wounded, met with relevant ministers. And I saw a photo. He came to the Maidan, squatting down right there on the Maidan. You know, on the lawn, there is a wide open field with an impressive number of flags. People bring these flags there in memory of the fallen fighters. And there he sits with the portraits of these warriors. And I saw that he was truly sincere, he was genuinely concerned, he understood what Putin had done, he saw that sea of flags and he understood everything perfectly well. You know, he could have just sat back as part of the royal family and done nothing, but instead he's doing such a good deed. He organized the Invictus Games. Well, the genes of Princess Diana of Wales don't just disappear. And there are many, well, I think those who have been to Maidan know, portraits of heroes who unfortunately returned home on their shields. Well, in places like that, it seems to me, everything becomes quieter, almost involuntarily when you walk by. Places like that, it's as if even the devils keep away. Characters like Orban and Fico shy away from incense. They hold meetings somewhere, always somewhere far away, right on the border. Fico holds them right at the border. God forbid, I don't want to. Because if you dragged him there, just told him, stand here and look right here at what your idol and buddy Putin has done for oil and gas, the one you're bending over backwards for, look at what he's done. Although it seems to me, if you have a conscience, you have it, and if you don't, you don't. And taking this opportunity, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who helps Ukraine and supports Ukraine in its fight for freedom. Believe me, Dictator. You can spend as many billions as you want on the elixir of youth, but no one is safe from a blow to the back of the head with a snuff box. This has been proven by many dictators. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. Let's support the fundraiser for our soldiers. We have just a little bit left to go. Wishing us all a peaceful day and, of course, glory to Ukraine.